Hi, I'm Tony Bedard, and I believe comics are literature, and you're watching Sequentially Yours.
Hey there, welcome to Sequentially Yours, initially mine. This is a show where we look at this week's number ones and see which ones are from our world and which ones are from the dark side. And that's actually a lead-in. Hey, look at that. Transitions to our first book, which we're going to run right into. What do we got here? Tales from the Dark Side. Alright, so if you haven't, if you've never seen it before, Tales from the Dark Side was an anthology horror show that was produced by George Romero in the 80s. I think it was from 83 to 88. I remember watching it, on late night television. It's somewhere in between Tales from the Crypt and Twilight Zone, in the sense that it does draw from a lot of sci-fi elements at times, but it's mostly a horror show, and it mostly has, your kind of standard twist ending. This is actually coming back from Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez, who did Lock and Key, which ended in 2013. And they've got chops, unquestionably. I like their work in general, and this is no exception. I've enjoyed this book. Apparently they want to keep it as an anthology series, but they also want to have a sort of background plot that sort of ties everything in together. At one point in this book, somebody shows up just to talk about a Darkside event. Whatever that is, we don't know yet, but we'll learn eventually in time, I assume. In the meantime, though, this was a pretty good Tales from the Dark Side style story. The characters were, for the most part, likable, except for one, which was, I don't think, intended to be. But it was hard to tell. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be sympathizing with this person or not. Either way, the concept worked. The imagery was fantastic. I really enjoyed this. I think that if you're looking for a good horror anthology series, Tales from the Dark Side might just be what you're looking for. There's been a lot of anthology series coming up lately, and I like to see that happening. I want to see more sort of short stories. I remember back in college, we studied primarily short stories in my various English classes, because they are very much a consolidation of what you need to do to make a story work. A short story really needs to be very tight, very well put together, very well structured, very intentionally structured. And that's what happens with anthology comics as well. They need to be intentionally structured. You can't really have, you can't write for the trade, as the term goes. You don't really work with 5 or 6 issue storylines. You've got to sort of keep everything together and make us like that character, or make us feel for that character in some way, even if we don't like them, so that when the ending happens, then we care. And that's what happened, at least in this issue. It's a good number one. It's everything that I look for in a number one. Tales from the Dark Side from IDW, highly recommended. Moving on. What else we got here? Han Solo, number 1. Alright, so, I like Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I really like Star Wars. I really do, although if you can't tell from the shirt, I'm more of a Star Trek guy, but Star Wars is still very, very good, and I grew up on it, and it's important, but man, they are just trying so hard to plumb the depths of every little moment in between the films to tell a story, and that's sort of what happened here with Han Solo. Essentially, it takes place between New Hope and Empire, where Han has gone off on his own to get back into the smuggling game, but for some reason he is now less sure of himself. He keeps turning down jobs, and then Leia basically sends people to try to get the Millennium Falcon so that he can get involved in a super space race, basically, with very, very high stakes, and while he's there, pick up rebellion spies that had been implanted into Imperial forces and now need extractions. It's not a bad plot, it's just, it goes out of its way to try to focus in on stuff that we haven't seen before, in much the same way that this is about the time that most of the Darth Vader comics are taking place. The problem with it is that it just doesn't need to be. We don't need to see it happen. Other than the fact that it sounds a lot like an episode of the 2003 Ninja Turtles, it just doesn't. I don't care. It's really what it boils down to, and that seems to be I'm sure if you're a regular, you know that is one of my major complaints, is that I don't care. And Han Solo is a character that I'm built to care about. I have literally cared about this character as long as I remember, and this one just could not get me to do that. I don't understand what sort of fell apart here. It tries to touch on the Han-Leia romance, and that works, I guess. But otherwise, this feels very much like Solo's Day Off. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, on the scale of Star Wars comics, there are much worse Star Wars comics out there, but it's not nearly as good as Lando or Poe Dameron or Darth Vader, quite frankly. And I think that I'm hoping that later issues will get better, but this one was just kind of eh. Alright, so let's move on. We're just breezing through stuff today, aren't we? What do we got? Norman! Oh, Norman. Oh, I kind of wished that this was about the guy who keeps appearing in shorts before Rift Tracks Live. You know, this guy here.
There it is, the most despairing sound ever produced by a human.
Yeah, him. Unfortunately, it's not. This is... Alright, so the main character is an 8-year-old who wants desperately to be a serial killer, and he lived in an orphanage, but apparently before everything happened in this book, he was presumed dead. I'm guessing something else happened. This might be based on something else, or bringing back an old character. I don't know what's going on. I didn't want to do the research on it because I don't care. This is just... This is Gruey slapstick, is basically what it is. It's, look at how funny it is that people are getting mangled. It's not amusing in any way. It's kind of boring and a little bit disturbing, but not disturbing in a positive way, not disturbing in a way that I want to be disturbed, disturbing in a lazy way, I guess would be the best way to put it. The consistent joke is, look at how funny it is that you think that innocence exists. It's cynical and mean-spirited. There's nothing really good about this. The art is half-assed anime style, half-assed manga style. The characters are all caricatures just put in there because we need to fill out the frames. Norman himself, the book spends very little time on Norman, but basically he wants to be a serial killer because he does, and that's really about it. Stan Silas did this. About the only thing that I will say works are the lighting. The lighting effects. The lighting effects look really good. But everything else is just kind of there. I can't even get up the urge to feel really upset about this because it's not even that upsetting. It's just... It's Happy Tree Friends. It's boringly cynical. It's, you know... If you took a tween and asked them to make something that was both funny and adult, this is what they would come up with. Because they don't understand that funny does not mean taking serious things necessarily and laughing at them without actually altering anything. And adult doesn't mean violent and gruesome. I don't mind violent and gruesome. I mean, I've told you how much I love like Alien and Predator novels and all, or books and all that, but this is just pointless. It's just a waste. Next. Oh, speaking of pointless and waste, The Joiners. Man, I'm hoping that this is just the boring number one that comes into something a little bit more exciting, because this was just such a slog. Oh, wow. It's just... It starts out with who will be our main character being dead, and them moving his estate over to a family member. And then we flash back to find out, presumably, why he is now dead. And essentially, we find out that he was an inventor, and he invented things, and he's not happy in his marriage, and sleeping with a co-worker, and he has kids. One thing I will say about The Joiners is that I buy into all of the family interactions. And it does a good job of telling us exactly what we need to know without going too far into that. That being said, these people are also boring. They just really are. There's nothing that draws me to them. There's nothing about Michael, for example, that... I kept thinking of him as Baxter Stockman on Ritalin. It's just... I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of this. And like I said, maybe they didn't give me enough, and I'm just not realizing that, because I think that they did, but I could be wrong. That being said, though, there's nothing that I can really grasp onto in this, and I'm having trouble talking about it because I don't know what to say. I don't know, nothing stands out to me. Even holding it in my hand and flipping through, I can't really remember what was going on. I will give them credit for really interesting art with sort of great coloring. The coloring on this is beautiful, but the characters are just so lifeless. Oh well. Alright, so every week there's got to be a number one, and this week is no different. This week's number one book is Weird Detective. I did not expect to like this. I genuinely did not expect to like this at all. Just looking at the cover, it looks a lot like Joe Occult. In the sense that it seems to be trying to draw from the old pulp Golden Age style comics. But you know what? This was really, really clever. So much so that I don't want to... I'm going to put the spoiler tag on here, which normally I don't do, but I'm going to put the spoiler tag on here, and you can go to here to avoid any spoilers on this. Okay? Alright. Spoilers. Alright, so the main character in here is sort of Sebastian Green. He is a guy who was a sort of middling, okay cop for the NYPD until a couple of months ago when suddenly he became super cop. And this starts out kind of, he gets a new partner. We've all seen these cliches before. But here's the interesting thing. He starts by talking about how human beings only really have 3 senses, because smell and taste are basically just touch. Okay, fine. But I have 17. Alright. As he goes through, he's introducing us to these other senses, not all 17, just as they become applicable. And then as we go through, we start to learn new things about him. He acts very strangely, and one of the running jokes is that everybody's like, well, he's Canadian. So that's why he acts strangely, apparently. He goes home and he talks to his cat, and his cat talks back telepathically. And basically, as we go on and on, we start to discover that Sebastian Green is in fact an alien possessing the original Sebastian Green, because Lovecraftian monsters are about to rise on Earth. His race and several other races that they have encountered were wiped out by these creatures. Essentially, whenever the stars align in a certain location, these creatures come up and wipe out Earth. And he's trying to figure out how to stop them so that he can save his race from what happened to them. This was interesting. I mean, this was a really kind of clever plot. It even used the Cthulhu mythos in a way that doesn't bore me, which I am so sick of Cthulhu right now, but you know what? This was clever. This was an interesting approach to it. More to the point, I really enjoyed that Sebastian Green starts out as your stereotypical super competent super cop. And as we go through, we find out that he really has no idea what's going on. He struggles with humanity and how to act like a human. There's one page that I love that's just him watching detectives in movies and using that to figure out how human detectives act. So, like, he's seeing Humphrey Bogart and James Rockford and, what's his name on Law and Order, the original, and, I mean, just, you know, he's watching these, he's like, yes, this is clearly how human detectives act. I am so human right now. I mean, it's Invader Zim levels of I am really human. I love it. It balances the humor and the drama and the horror so well. His new partner is essentially disgraced and has been demoted from counterterrorism. And she is fascinating, and when I say that Sebastian Green is kind of the main character, she also has a lot of screen time in this. Because essentially, part of her demotion is you need to figure out how this guy has gotten so good so quickly. What is he doing? Meanwhile, Sebastian is upset because he can no longer work on his own and he has to actually explain himself. Because unlike the police captain who just wants results, she won't accept things like it's a hunch to explain very, very specific things that have happened. Yeah, all in all, it's really well done. Art-wise, it's heavily shadowed, and we talked a couple of weeks ago about heavy shadows and how I generally don't like them, but it works really well in this because it is drawing so much from noir traditions and from sort of golden age detective story traditions. It fits really well into this context. So even though it may be a little bit difficult for me to pay attention to and kind of see through the shadows, I still think it's worth it. There are some really great things going on here. Another thing that I like is that his main mission is not really the only mission, and it's not the only mission related to these Lovecraftian horrors either, as you find out as it goes. And they slip it in very, very well. Van Lente and Fred Van Lente is the script. Art by Guiu, Guiu. I am so sorry, Mr. or Miss Villanova. Guiu Villanova. And colors by Mauricio Wallace and Yosan Gonzalez. All this is a fantastic team, and they are doing a great job of telling a really exciting and interesting story that, yes, definitely touches on tropes that we're familiar with, but does so in a unique fashion and from different angles. I enjoyed reading this like nobody's business. I am putting it on my list of subscriptions. Until it gets boring, it will be sitting on my subscription list, and I will get it whenever it comes in, because this is worth it. Dark Horse Comics really has, I think, a really special book on their hands here. And if you get a chance to read Weird Detective, The Stars Are Wrong, go for it. I don't think that you're going to be disappointed. Alright, so, what do we got? What do we got this week? Oh, yes, that's right. The strangely incongruous theme. The oddly incongruous theme. Still working on this. And I was supposed to get rid of incongruous, and instead I got rid of oddly. Well, we're still doing oddly incongruous theme until I have a graphic that solidifies this. So, the oddly incongruous theme for this week is throwbacks. Yep, everything in here has a bit of a throwback to something else, whether it is Norman's throwback to horror movie cliches, Tales from the Darkside, a throwback to a 1980s television show, The Joiners, which stylistically looks a lot like the Jetsons, Han Solo, obviously, Star Wars, and finally, Weird Detective is clearly drawing from Golden Age comics as well as noir movies. It's all throwback stuff, and it all works. It all, well, some of it works. I'm not gonna lie. That was a lie. I'm sorry. It does not all work. I just got excited. Most of it works. Most of it works really well, and I guess the throwbacky parts, for the most part, work as well. So, yeah. I don't know if you're gonna like any of these, but these opinions were initially mine. Take care.